The Family Feud studio radiated its characteristic warmth on that April afternoon in 2024. Steve Harvey positioned himself at center stage, prepared to shepherd another episode through the familiar rhythms that had made the program a cornerstone of American family entertainment. The audience settled into their seats with anticipation, production staff monitored their equipment with practiced efficiency, and two families stood ready at their podiums for what appeared to be standard competition. However, within the span of 20 minutes, a revelation would emerge that would render Steve Harvey, a man renowned for his quick wit and constant verbal engagement, completely speechless for nearly a full minute, demonstrating that sometimes the most powerful response to profound truth is simply bearing witness in silence. If you are discovering our channel for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe and engage with this material, because what follows is an extraordinary story about the secrets people carry, the courage required to release them, and the transformation that becomes possible when truth finally sees light. Standing at the contestant podium was 41-year-old Marcus Williams from Detroit, Michigan. He presented as a confident, successful man, wearing a crisp navy blazer over a white shirt, his posture upright and assured. Beside him stood his wife of 17 years, Angela Williams, along with their two teenage children, Marcus Jr., who was 15, and daughter Jasmine, who was 13. Marcus's younger brother Dwayne and Angela's sister Keisha completed the Williams family team. From external observation, they embodied the image of an accomplished American family, the type who had worked hard, achieved stability, and now stood ready to enjoy a lighthearted game show experience together. What the studio audience could not perceive, what even Marcus's extended family members did not fully comprehend, was the extraordinary secret that Marcus had been guarding for his entire adult life. A deception so carefully maintained and so fundamentally woven into the fabric of his daily existence that its revelation would challenge everyone's understanding of what they thought they knew about this man. Marcus Williams had built a successful career as a construction foreman, had raised two children, had maintained a marriage, had navigated the countless document-driven requirements of modern American life, all while harboring a secret that affected literally every aspect of his existence. Marcus could not read. Despite graduating from high school, despite holding a responsible position managing construction crews, despite being a father who helped with homework and a husband who handled family responsibilities, Marcus was functionally illiterate. He had developed an elaborate system of coping mechanisms over decades, strategies so sophisticated and so thoroughly integrated into his behavior that even those closest to him had never suspected the truth. He memorized street signs and building addresses by visual landmarks rather than reading words. He recognized products in stores by their packaging colors and logos rather than printed labels. He navigated his work responsibilities through exceptional listening skills, photographic memory for visual details, and carefully cultivated relationships with people who would read documents aloud without realizing they were providing essential assistance rather than casual conversation. The origins of Marcus's illiteracy traced back to his childhood in an underfunded Detroit public school system during the 1980s and early 1990s. He had struggled with reading from the beginning, likely due to undiagnosed dyslexia or another learning disability that went unrecognized in overcrowded classrooms where teachers lacked resources to provide individualized attention. As he fell further behind, shame and embarrassment prevented him from asking for help. He became skilled at hiding his difficulties, developing the compensation strategies that would serve him throughout his life. By the time he reached high school, he had perfected the art of appearing literate while avoiding situations that would expose his inability to read. The only person who knew Marcus's complete truth was Angela. He had revealed his secret to her early in their relationship, terrified that honesty would end their budding romance, but more terrified of building a life on deception. Angela's response had been compassionate rather than judgmental, accepting rather than rejecting. She had quietly helped him navigate the written requirements of adult life for nearly 2 decades, reading documents that required his signature, helping him prepare for work situations that involved written materials, protecting his secret as carefully as he did. Their partnership had been built partially on this shared conspiracy of silence, a secret that bound them together while also creating distance that neither fully acknowledged. But secrets, even those kept with loving intention, exact costs that accumulate over time. Marcus had watched his children grow into voracious readers, celebrating their academic achievements while privately grieving that he could not fully participate in that aspect of their development. He had advanced as far as possible in his career, reaching the limits of what could be accomplished without strong literacy skills, unable to pursue further opportunities that required reading technical documents, safety regulations, or contract specifications. He had lived with constant anxiety about being discovered, about situations arising that would expose his inability to read and destroy the life he had built. The psychological burden of maintaining this deception had grown heavier with each passing year. The Family Feud appearance had been Angela's idea, proposed as a way to create a positive family memory and perhaps win prize money that could help with their children's college expenses. Marcus had agreed reluctantly, concerned about potential situations during filming that might expose his secret, but trusting Angela to help him navigate any written elements. The game had proceeded through its early rounds without incident. Marcus participated in the verbal aspects of competition, answering questions based on common knowledge and life experience, contributing to his family's success in ways that did not require reading. However, during a commercial break before the final round, something shifted within Marcus. Perhaps it was the accumulated weight of decades of deception. Perhaps it was seeing his children's pride in being on television with their father, and knowing that pride was built partially on false pretenses. Perhaps it was simply exhaustion with the constant vigilance required to maintain his secret. Whatever the catalyst, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. When filming resumed, and Steve Harvey prepared to begin the next round, Marcus raised his hand to interrupt. "Harvey, before we continue, I need to say something," Marcus stated, his voice steady despite visible tension in his shoulders. "I need to tell you something that I should have told people a long time ago." Steve's expression shifted from game show host to attentive listener, a transition those familiar with his work had witnessed before when contestants signaled something important needed to be addressed. "All right, Marcus, what's on your mind?" Steve responded, giving Marcus his complete focus. Marcus took a breath that seemed to require conscious effort, then spoke words he had never said aloud to anyone except Angela. "Mr. Harvey, I am 41 years old and I cannot read. I graduated from high school, I have worked in construction for over 20 years, I have raised 2 children, and I have never been able to read beyond a first or second grade level. I have been hiding this my entire adult life, and I cannot hide it anymore. I am tired of pretending. I am tired of living in fear that someone will discover my secret. I am tired of the shame. I need help, and I do not know how to ask for it except to say it out loud right now, right here, in front of all these people." The studio fell into profound silence. Steve Harvey's face registered shock, confusion, and dawning comprehension as he processed what he had just heard. His mouth opened as if to respond, but no words emerged. He stood completely still, his usual animated expressiveness replaced by absolute motionless attention. The silence extended for what felt like an eternity, though recordings would later show it lasted approximately 45 seconds, an extraordinary length of dead air in television production. During those 45 seconds, Steve simply looked at Marcus with an expression that conveyed respect for the courage being demonstrated, sorrow for the burden this man had carried, and recognition that this moment required something beyond his typical quick responses. When Steve finally spoke, his voice was quieter than usual, stripped of its characteristic performance quality. "Marcus, I do not even know what to say. I am trying to process what you just shared." "You have been living like this for how long?" Marcus's response revealed the magnitude of what he had been managing. "Since I was a child. I struggled in school, fell behind in reading, and never caught up. I learned how to hide it, how to get by, how to make people think I could read when I could not. My wife Angela, she is the only person who has known the truth. She has been helping me for 17 years, reading things for me, protecting my secret, carrying this burden with me." Steve turned to Angela, his expression showing understanding of the complex position she had occupied. "Angela, you have been living with this knowledge all this time." Angela nodded, tears already streaming down her face. "I love my husband, Mr. Harvey. When he told me he could not read, I saw his shame and his fear, and I wanted to help him, to protect him. I thought I was being supportive, being a good wife. But over the years, I have realized that by helping him hide it, I may have prevented him from getting the help he actually needed. I have been conflicted about this for a long time. Steve walked several steps away, his hand on his head, clearly struggling with how to respond to this revelation. When he returned, he addressed Marcus with a combination of compassion and directness. Marcus, I need to ask you some questions, and I hope you will be honest with me. How do you do your job? How do you help your children with schoolwork? How do you handle all the reading that adult life requires? Marcus's answers revealed the elaborate system he had constructed. My job, I memorize everything. Safety procedures, building codes, material specifications. I have other people read them aloud, and I memorize what they say. My crew thinks I am just thorough, asking them to review procedures verbally. I learn by watching and listening rather than reading instructions. For my children's homework, I tell them to read their assignments aloud to me so I can hear what they are learning. I frame it as being interested in their education, which I am, but it is also the only way I can help them because I cannot read their textbooks. He continued, for documents I need to sign, Angela handles them. For forms at doctors' offices or government agencies, I tell them my glasses are broken or that I forgot them, and I ask if they can help me fill out the paper. People are usually willing to help, and they do not realize they are reading and writing for someone who cannot do those things himself. I have developed hundreds of small strategies like this, ways to navigate a world built on reading and writing when you cannot do either. Steve's expression showed he was genuinely moved and troubled by what he was hearing. Marcus, do you understand what you have been doing? You have been living a lie for decades, not because you are a bad person, but because you were ashamed of something that is not your fault. Millions of adults in this country struggle with literacy. It is not a character flaw. It is an educational failure that happened to you, and you have been punishing yourself for it ever since. The observation hit Marcus visibly, his composure cracking as tears began to fall. I know, Mr. Harvey, I know it is not rational, but the shame, it is so deep. When you cannot do something that everyone else seems to do automatically, something as basic as reading, you feel fundamentally broken. You feel stupid even though you know you are not stupid. I have run construction crews, managed complex projects, solved problems that required intelligence and skill. But I cannot read a simple sentence, and that has made me feel worthless my entire life. Steve turned to address the cameras, recognizing that this moment had significance beyond just Marcus's personal story. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about something that affects more people than you might realize. Adult illiteracy is a hidden crisis in this country. People are ashamed to admit they struggle with reading, so they hide it, just like Marcus has been hiding it. They develop coping strategies, they avoid situations that would expose them, and they live with constant fear and shame. This needs to stop. We need to make it safe for adults to admit they need help with literacy without being judged or ridiculed. He turned back to Marcus, his voice carrying conviction. You just did something incredibly brave. You stopped hiding. You asked for help. And I promise you, we are going to get you that help. This show has resources, I have resources, and we are going to connect you with literacy programs that specialize in working with adults who want to learn to read. It is never too late, Marcus. You can learn. And when you do, your life is going to change in ways you cannot even imagine right now. What followed was an extended conversation that departed completely from standard game show format. Steve brought educational specialists onto the stage via video conference, connecting Marcus with adult literacy advocates who could explain what learning to read as an adult would involve. They discussed the prevalence of adult illiteracy, estimated at approximately 32 million American adults who cannot read above a third-grade level. They explained that shame and stigma were the primary barriers preventing adults from seeking help, that learning to read as an adult was entirely possible with appropriate instruction, and that many successful people had overcome illiteracy later in life. Marcus's children, who had been standing in shocked silence processing their father's revelation, were given opportunity to respond. 15-year-old Marcus Jr. spoke with a maturity beyond his years. Dad, I had no idea. All those times you asked me to read my homework aloud, I thought you were just being involved. I never suspected. I do not think less of you for this. I think you are brave for admitting it. 13-year-old Jasmine added through tears, Daddy, I will help you learn. We can read together. I can be your teacher like you have been mine. The offers from his children broke Marcus completely. He sobbed openly, years of accumulated shame and fear releasing in those tears. Angela moved to his side, holding him while crying herself, the burden they had carried together for so long finally acknowledged publicly. Steve allowed the moment to unfold without rushing it, understanding that this family needed space to process what was happening. When Marcus regained some composure, Steve made several commitments that would transform the situation from confession to action. Marcus, here is what we are going to do. First, we're going to connect you with the best adult literacy program in the Detroit area. They are going to provide you with individualized instruction designed specifically for adults learning to read. Second, I am going to personally fund your tuition and materials, so that cost is not a barrier. Third, we are going to check in with you regularly, follow your progress, and celebrate your achievements as you learn. Steve continued, but I also want to use your story to help other people. With your permission, I want to create a segment about adult illiteracy, featuring your journey and encouraging other adults who struggle with reading to seek help without shame. We can change the culture around this issue, but we need people like you to be willing to share your experience. Marcus agreed without hesitation, recognizing that his personal transformation could potentially help others facing similar struggles. The game resumed in a modified format, with the Williams family competing and ultimately winning their match. However, the victory felt secondary to the more significant events that had transpired. The episode that aired 6 weeks later included extensive educational content about adult illiteracy, resources for viewers seeking help with literacy challenges, and information about programs available nationwide. The production company partnered with national literacy organizations to ensure accurate information and appropriate resources were provided. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within 72 hours of the episode airing, adult literacy programs across the country reported dramatic increases in enrollment inquiries, with thousands of adults citing Marcus's courage as inspiration to finally seek help they had been too ashamed to request. Marcus entered an intensive adult literacy program 3 days after the Family Feud taping. The program utilized teaching methods specifically designed for adult learners, recognizing that adults brought different cognitive abilities, life experiences, and motivations to literacy education than children did. Marcus attended classes 4 evenings per week, working with specialized instructors who understood the psychological and emotional challenges adults faced when learning to read. The process was difficult and often frustrating, requiring Marcus to confront decades of internalized shame while building skills from fundamental levels. Angela participated in family literacy sessions designed to help relatives support adult learners without inadvertently undermining their progress or independence. She learned to encourage Marcus's reading practice while resisting the impulse to simply read things for him as she had done for years. Their children became involved as well, celebrating their father's progress and occasionally serving as practice partners for basic reading exercises. The family dynamic shifted as the secret that had shaped their relationships for years was replaced by shared commitment to Marcus's education. 4 months after beginning his literacy education, Marcus returned to Steve Harvey's show for a follow-up interview. The transformation was visible even before he spoke. There was a lightness to his presence, a confidence that had not existed during his original appearance despite his previously polished exterior. Marcus shared that he had progressed from first-grade reading level to approximately 4th grade level in just 4 months, with continued advancement expected as his education continued. More importantly, he described the psychological liberation that came from no longer hiding his illiteracy. Marcus brought a children's book to the interview, one that he read aloud haltingly but successfully to demonstrate his progress. The book was The Giving Tree by Shel Silverstein, which he explained held special significance because he had never been able to read it to his children when they were young despite it being their favorite bedtime story. Angela had always been the one to read it to them while Marcus sat beside her, memorizing the words through repetition so he could recite them without actually reading. Now, for the first time, he could read those words himself. The studio audience gave him a standing ovation as he finished reading, many wiping away tears at the significance of this seemingly simple achievement. Steve asked Marcus about the impact literacy was having on his life beyond the emotional aspects. Marcus shared that he had already begun reading safety manuals and construction specifications at work, no longer needing to rely solely on memorization and others' verbal explanations. He had started reading bedtime stories to his children, an experience that felt profound for all of them. He had begun reading restaurant menus independently, a small pleasure that most people took for granted, but which represented freedom for Marcus. He described feeling like he was discovering an entirely new dimension of the world that had always existed, but had been inaccessible to him. Angela reflected on how Marcus's literacy journey had affected their marriage. She acknowledged that their relationship had been built partially on her role as his secret keeper and helper, a dynamic that had created some unhealthy patterns even as it demonstrated her love and commitment. As Marcus gained literacy skills and independence, they were learning to relate to each other in new ways, building a partnership based on equality rather than necessary dependence. The process was not always easy, requiring both of them to examine long-standing patterns and develop new ways of interacting. But Angela expressed optimism about the evolution of their relationship. The interview concluded with Marcus offering encouragement to other adults struggling with illiteracy. If you cannot read, you are not stupid and you are not alone. Millions of adults face this challenge. The shame keeps you trapped, but the truth can set you free. I spent 25 years hiding my illiteracy, thinking that admitting it would destroy my life. But speaking the truth, asking for help, that is what actually gave me my life back. It is never too late to learn. I am 41 years old and I am learning to read. If I can do it, so can you. Steve Harvey used the segment to announce a partnership between his foundation and national literacy organizations, committing significant funding to expand adult literacy programs in underserved communities. He encouraged viewers to volunteer as literacy tutors, to donate to literacy programs, and to examine their own attitudes about education and intelligence to ensure they were not contributing to the shame that prevented adults from seeking help. Segment became one of the most watched and most shared in Steve Harvey's talk show history, sparking national conversations about adult illiteracy and educational equity. 1 year after his initial Family Feud appearance, Marcus had achieved approximately 6th grade reading level and continued progressing steadily. He had been promoted at work to a position that required reading and interpreting complex technical documents, something that would have been impossible before his literacy education. He had enrolled in community college courses to further develop his skills and potentially pursue a degree. He had become a volunteer speaker for adult literacy programs, sharing his story at community events and encouraging others to seek help without shame. Marcus also participated in advocacy efforts to improve literacy education in public schools, working to ensure that children who struggled with reading received early intervention and support rather than being allowed to fall through the cracks as he had been. He testified before state education committees about the long-term costs of educational failure, both for individuals who spent decades managing illiteracy and for society that lost the full contributions these individuals could have made if they had received appropriate education. His advocacy, grounded in lived experience, carried weight that academic research alone could not provide. The Williams family story became a case study used in educational programs, training teachers and literacy specialists. It illustrated the elaborate coping mechanisms adults develop to hide illiteracy, the psychological impact of carrying such secrets, the family dynamics that formed around undisclosed struggles, and the transformative potential of adult literacy education when delivered with appropriate methods and emotional support. Thousands of educators gain new understanding about adult learners through Marcus's example, improving their ability to serve students effectively. As this profound story reaches its conclusion, several essential lessons merit consideration. Marcus Williams's decision to publicly admit his illiteracy, while terrifying for him, created opportunities for healing and growth that decades of hiding had prevented. His vulnerability gave permission to countless others to acknowledge their own literacy challenges and seek help. His journey demonstrated that it is genuinely never too late to learn, that adult brains remain capable of acquiring fundamental skills with appropriate instruction, and that the shame surrounding educational deficits causes more damage than the deficits themselves. Steve Harvey's response to Marcus's revelation, particularly those 45 seconds of complete silence, demonstrated the power of simply bearing witness to profound truth without rushing to fill space with words. Sometimes the most appropriate response to vulnerability is silent attention that honors the courage being demonstrated. Steve's subsequent actions to provide resources, follow Marcus's progress, and use his platform to address adult illiteracy more broadly showed that responding to individual need effectively requires both immediate personal support and systemic advocacy for broader change. If this account has resonated with you, or if you or someone you know struggles with literacy, please engage with this content and subscribe to our channel. These stories of hidden struggles and courageous transformation matter profoundly. They remind us that millions of people navigate daily life while managing challenges invisible to others, that shame prevents people from seeking help they desperately need, and that creating safe spaces for truth-telling can unlock healing and growth. Marcus Williams's shocking admission on Family Feud will be remembered not merely as dramatic television, but as a watershed moment that helped destigmatize adult illiteracy and inspired thousands of people to pursue education they had believed was beyond their reach, proving that speaking truth, however difficult, remains the essential first step toward genuine transformation.